Hello, so today I am in Hampton, Virginia. I'm actually in a little place called Phoebus, which is like a kind of an annex or an add-on to Hampton. But what I'm going to be doing today is going over here to Fort Monroe. It's a place I've talked about a couple of times. It's kind of neat to just walk around and see some of the things there. So we're gonna go and check that out. I do want to bring up that it is a Civil War era fort. So a lot of the things we're going to be seeing, a lot of things we're going to be learning about, it's going to have to do with things leading up to and during the Civil War. So if those are things that you are just uncomfortable discussing, I understand if this video is not for you. But for anyone else, let's go check it out. All right, guys, using the power of chronomancy, I am now able to bring you this video from two separate points in time. Granted, yes, those two separate points are only about a week apart, but still, that's pretty cool, right? Not many other people doing videos like that special. All right, look, I'm going to be honest with you. There was some complications when I was here last week. I had to quit filming early. And somebody, not going to name names, but I'm the only person out here doing this, so you can kind of, through the power of math, figure out who to point fingers at. Somebody forgot to hit record while we were walking around, and a lot of footage was lost. So now I'm back out here. I'm going to re-record a few things, finish up a few things, so throughout the video, you'll see me in the hat and glasses cutting in to fill in some gaps. All right, so here we go. We're heading on to the fort, actually onto the island on the fort. And to get onto it, you have to cross one of these two bridges, which are kind of nice little drives, especially on a day like today. So let's go over a little bit of the history on Fort Monroe. Way back in the 1600s, when settlers were first coming to Virginia, they staked out this piece of land because it offered a little bit of protection. There's a fort here, and then there's a sister fort on the other side of the Chesapeake Bay. And the two of them sort of became guardians of the entry point of the Chesapeake Bay. And I'm trying to remember, I looked up, I saw the name of the first fort that was established there. Nothing like this. It was a much more rudimentary fort. Probably a little more like the Jamestown settlement if you go and look at it or have seen pictures of it. Sort of that wooden triangular fort. A lot of this was starting to be set up during the Civil War. And there's actually a lot of history there, which I'll probably be going into as I'm walking around. This is kind of one of the interesting pieces of the Fort Monroe history. Named for President James Monroe. Like I said, it was founded back in the 1800s, just before the Civil War, I believe. But what was really interesting is that even though we're in a southern state, and Richmond, which is just about an hour or so north of us, was the capital of the Confederacy, the fort was actually occupied by Union forces, and they held it during, I believe, most of the Civil War. They used it to imprison Jefferson Davis. I've also read that escaped slaves made their way to the fort and were granted protection. Now, unfortunately, the actual act or law that protected them was a property rule, because people were still considered property back then. But they were able to come here and not be punished or sent back to their slave masters back outside of the fort. And here are a couple placards kind of going over what I was talking about. And it was actually the contraband of war policy that kept them from returning the slaves to the slave owners. And as word was spread about this, people started calling it Freedom's Fortress. So we are now headed towards, I believe, the main gate of the fort. And to get there, you drive down this long road. And it gets kind of interesting and perilous because when you get down to here, there's just enough room for one car in this driveway. So there's this nice little traffic light here keeping people from having major accidents while coming onto and off of the fort. It's kind of interesting and spooky little walkway here for people. Okay, so it's creepy because this actually used to be, this was a large prison room. And over here is the door leading to individual cells. And supposedly, between 20 and 40 men were kept in this room. I can't even imagine that. Okay, so we can actually come up here. And got a little sign warning about steep drop-off. So let's be very, very careful as we walk up the wall. We appear to have a little pet cemetery up here. Being that most of these are around the same time. Between the 50s and the 70s. It seems it actually goes quite a ways down this ridge. It's like a little marking here from 1761. Or is that 1961? It might be 1961. That makes a little more sense, since this fort wasn't really commissioned until the 1860s or the 1800s. See what they mean. If you're not paying attention and sort of veer over here, you're going for a little roll. Now on the base, they also have the Casemate Museum. Unfortunately, I believe it is closed with everything going on, which is unfortunate because it does give you a little more information on the fort. I think that's also where you can see the actual cell that they kept Davis in. It's been a while since I've been there. I got some wax figures in the window here that gave me a little bit of a startle when I was walking up. Oh, especially this guy. Another short tunnel here leads us back outside. There's a little sign talking about the moat, as one of the wildlife is going in the background. What is it, Doc? Sing us the song of your people. All right, that's enough tormenting wildlife. Let's go back inside. So this is kind of an aerial view giving you an idea of how big this is. So that there is where we drove in. I believe right over here is where I filmed that intro. So we drove in here and then we came down this way. Maybe we came down this way, because that's the first bridge I walked into, and then that's the footbridge that I walked out of a few moments ago. But then this is the whole fort here, and this is the whole island that we are currently on. Now here's something interesting I've learned. I don't know if you ever heard the quaint phrase, "so cold it freezes the balls off a brass monkey." Where that comes from is you get like a stack of cannonballs like this. They're actually being held by this little triangular thing at the bottom. That's the brass monkey. And when it gets cold, brass constricts. And when it starts to constrict, all of these cannonballs will start falling all over the place. So that's where that quaint little phrase comes from. So yeah, this arc up here used to have the park name on it, and they have since taken that down. And this kind of shows what it used to be. It was a memorial to Jefferson Davis. This little placard goes on to explain that it was done in the 1950s during the height of the civil rights movement. And if you haven't watched the Last Week Tonight episode on the Confederacy, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, I highly recommend going to do that. He goes into an explanation of how during the 1950s and the 1960s was sort of the surge in Confederate monuments, statues, renamings, things like that, as a way to sort of fight against the civil rights movement. And of course, with the newest wave of protests and people raising general concerns, they have taken Davis's name off the sign. As of yet, I don't know if I've heard if it's going to be changed. Just taking a quick little break here. I'll be honest, for the past year, I haven't really gone out and done all that much. And there's a lot of walking here today. And it's actually quite warm out, so hey, this is good. If you're in or around Phoebus in Virginia, this is a good place to stop by and walk around. Very pretty. And if you keep going up and down hills like I am, you'll get plenty of exercise. I believe all along here is where the artillery would have been set up to look out on the bay, and if anybody was coming up here. Now that is the, I believe that's the Point Pleasant Lighthouse. I don't think we could get up there, but we could certainly try later. And then I believe if you look kind of further in the background, let's see if I can zoom in any. You might be able to see, I believe that is the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. For anybody not familiar, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel and the Monitor Merrimack Tunnel are two bridge tunnels in Virginia connecting the Hampton Newport News side with the like Norfolk, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach side. And what you do for those is you'll drive across for a bit above the water, and then it'll actually go underneath the water, allowing ships and other things to pass above it before you come back out on the other side. Having kind of grown up here, I'm used to those. They don't seem odd to me, but people that have not been in Virginia before are a little freaked out by them. And again, you want to be very careful here with kids and pets. So you come to the other side of this wall. There's a sign here. It's either going to say no vehicles allowed, or it's going to say no admittance at all. I think that's just for vehicles. I think we're good. And again, we have a bunch of private residencies back in here, which again, I believe used to be like soldiers' quarters and office buildings, maybe, things like that. And I mentioned before that the residencies might have been office buildings or things like that. I believe these were the actual office buildings. These look a bit more official. All chained up and quite closed, it looks like. And these do look like nice little residencies. You got some nice enclosed balconies, maybe some little private lawn areas here. Well, private in air quotes. I do wonder what all of these buildings are used for now. They're not labeled in any way, and they look pretty shut down. So what in the world are they doing with all of them at the moment? Looks like maybe it was some sort of electrical room. No, just completely empty. And we have made it all the way around the inside of Fort Monroe. But I'm sure, as you saw from that map earlier, there's still a lot more to check out. So right now I'm standing on top of one of the batteries along the outside of Fort Monroe. Unfortunately, I can't get inside. They're not letting people in. But it does give you kind of a nice view of the bay. Looks like we can climb on down this way. Actually get a look at one of these huge guns. Now I have to imagine that tree branch was not there, you know, back when this gun was used, because that would be really, really awkward. Again, this may have been some kind of a cell they kept people in. Now it's just a place to hide your empties. I wish we could get up here and check it out. Fortunately, it is off limits. I don't know if that is maybe a safety concern. Maybe there's some structural issues going on. But it would be really neat if they'd open it back up. Oh yeah, I'm seeing some minor issues with the railings. OSHA would have a field day. So yeah, at the moment, this one that we were just climbing on, Battery Irwin, is the only one that's open to the public. Well, it's great hearing about this place, you know, being referred to as Freedom's Fort and the things that they did for escaped slaves during the Civil War. It is important, I think, to remember that, one, they were able to do that because of laws regarding personal property. And there is another part of history that I think is important to remember, and has really been getting a lot of attention lately. Fort Monroe is also the site of one of the first ships landing that held slaves captured from Africa. It is believed that they are some of the first to have come to America, at least under an English-ruled ship. And over the past couple of years, this has become sort of a landmark and a rallying point for the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, the Fort Monroe Authority, along with some other groups, are already planning on putting in a permanent memorial to commemorate that event. And it is going to include a sculpture by Brian R. Owens. So I'm excited to see what this is going to look like. And standing on the pier off in the distance, you can see the Chamberlain Hotel, which I believe has gone through a couple of designs and iterations. Originally, it was used to house builders for the fort. I believe it also was used to house some soldiers. And then it became, I believe, a fairly nice hotel for the longest time, especially for people that were coming to visit the fort, visit Virginia. But after the fort had to go into lockdown after 9/11, there weren't a lot of visitors for the hotel. And I believe now it is actually a retirement community. It's the old Point Comfort Lighthouse. I think I may have called it something else before. But as I suspected, no, we cannot climb up to the top. All right, let's try getting a little video of driving into the fort. And you can see, like, this path is literally wide enough for a single car, as long as the car is not too wide itself. This is called Quarters 1. This is where Abraham Lincoln stayed when he came to visit the fort back in 1862. And this is where he and several other commanders and leaders planned the attack on Norfolk. Now, I remember seeing a couple of accounts of people seeing Lincoln's ghost here in the fort, which is kind of interesting. I can imagine, you know, a historical place like this actually has a couple of ghosts. I think I've also seen reports of people seeing Edgar Allan Poe's ghost. Now, I know I haven't seen anything that Poe has been here at the fort a lot. I know he's been up in Richmond a lot, and people have seen his ghost or spirit up there. But I've not seen anything to say that he's been, or I haven't seen much to say that he's been here at Fort Worth or Fort Monroe a lot. But it does bring me to the idea that I am looking at several ghost stories in Virginia, and maybe in the fall when we get back around to spooky season, I'll do a video about that. Now, I'd imagine if you were living in one of the houses out here, that there are a lot of rules and regulations you have to follow in these historic houses. And I'd be very curious to know what that experience is like. There's another one of these cool fortification batteries that I wish was open so you could get up there and take a look around. Unfortunately, like the others, it is closed. We've got a couple of these office buildings along here. I believe they are currently rented out by businesses. They got some signs out front advertising what they are. So again, I ask, what are those buildings inside the fort? All right, well, after a day or two of exploring, maybe you want to unwind with a drink, come out here to Ouzelfinch Beer and Blending. I talked about this place a couple times, reviewed some of their stuff. Honestly, this is probably one of my favorite breweries in the area. They do some real unique stuff They mostly work with like sours and IPAs. So if you're looking for something a little different, this is definitely the place to come. It also has kind of an interesting backstory. The Ouzel Finch itself has an interesting story. So apparently in the early 1900s, a captain left the local officers club and then came running back in, claiming he saw a giant bird, like a 6-foot wingspan. Now, odds are this captain was probably inebriated and more than likely saw a heron. I think there was one or two at the Virginia Living Museum. You probably saw if you go back and see that video. They're pretty large birds, and if you see them at night, it would probably look a little intimidating, especially if their eyes caught some light and glowed red. But he came tearing back in, claiming he saw this monstrous bird. Everybody else there started kind of laughing at him, and the Ouzel Finch, as it came to be known, became sort of the symbol of the officers club. They had a mock-up of it behind the bar, and years later, this brewery came and moved in, and they adopted that bird as their symbol. And for anybody curious, yes, I've had a mask this whole time. It's been in my pocket. I've just run into so few people here. There's been enough distance between us that didn't really need it all that much. All right, so yeah, what I got here is they called it Freedom's Blanket. It's an IPA with apple, cinnamon, cardamom, lemon peel, and some vanilla. So yeah, you get the IPA taste up front. And the cinnamon and cardamom are really coming through strong after that. It is, again, an interesting take. This probably would have worked better with like a lager or something. But again, if you come to Ouzel Finch, expect to get something a little unusual. All right, I did enjoy that last one, but I decided to throw caution to the wind and get a second beer. This one is I'm going to say this wrong, Bière de Garde. Essentially, I think it's like a farmhouse ale, so those are like super yeasty ones, just because they're trying to make something strong that would last them through the winter. And this one has molasses in it, so probably going to be some somewhat sweet, almost like a caramelized brown sugar taste, but also with that really pungent yeast. So let's see what we got. So it does have a very dry taste. The sweetness is kind of cut down by the hops they put in there and I think some of the yeast. So I mean, it kind of balances out. It almost drinks like a porter. That kind of dark beer that is almost like a stout but not as heavy. I think that's going to be about it for me today. So what did we learn? We learned that there could be two sides to history. I think it is very important to remember both sides of that history. While I know Virginia has a very troubled history, I'm glad to see that they are acknowledging that these things are not correct. They should be renamed and redone. They took down Davis's name. They took down, was it Davis in Richmond? They took that monument down. So there is change being done, but there's a lot of change that can still be done. Basically, some place like this, like Fort Monroe, is a fun place to come out to. You can learn a lot, you can see a lot. There's a lot of great places to walk around. If you're here in Virginia in Hampton Phoebus area, stop by Fort Monroe, take a look around. There's some beautiful places, some fun stuff to check out. Thank you guys so much for hanging out in this video. It's going to be a little weird with the editing, trying to smash these 2 days together. But thank you so much for checking it out. And if you made it this far, thank you so much. Of course, always please, if you liked this, please like it. Comment on it if you have any questions, or if there's any other places especially right now in Virginia, that you think I should check out. I got a couple places in mind. But leave the comment, and of course, hit the subscribe button, and there's a little bell that'll let you know if I post a new video. Videos will probably be a little sporadic for a while, but hopefully I'll get into a good routine. But for now, I'm gonna head off. Thank you guys so much again for looking at this, and I hope you have a good day.